All right, welcome into the basketball show with Taylor and Jim, Taylor Core and Jim Dunaway. Little T, it's basketball season again. Last year, we went to National and saw Auburn win a championship. We went to Phoenix and saw Alabama in the Final Four. Maybe we can go even deeper this year.
I hope so. I'm glad it's back. It's obviously been kicking for a little while now, but the overlap between basketball and football happens for a couple months. So I'm glad that conference play is about to start because it should be a very entertaining next few months.
Here's what we're planning on doing. After Auburn and Alabama games, home and away, we're going to have a post-game show. Taylor and I are going to react with your live reactions. Sometimes it'll be two shows on a Saturday. Sometimes it'll be one show. If, like this Saturday, the games are close together. But we're going to try to jump on after Auburn, after Alabama conclusions, home and away. We're going to try to do two shows this week. And then we're going to have these recorded podcasts to review what's happened and then look ahead to what's coming up. They should drop for you either on Sunday night or Monday mornings, on Thursday night or Friday mornings, in time for you to enjoy on your way to work or on your way to the games on those days. Coming up on this episode, at the end, Taylor's going to take us through a mailbag, some of your questions. We're going to talk about quad one games coming up in the SEC play. But we want to start, Taylor, with what Auburn and Alabama player has exceeded your expectations through this amazing pre-conference schedule, and what Auburn and Alabama player has not yet met your expectations during this amazing start to the basketball season. And it has been amazing for Auburn, who should be number one in everything. They're number one in all the metrics. And Alabama, who is right there, top 10 team as well. So who has exceeded expectations for you at Auburn first?
Denver Jones. Denver Jones is the easy answer for me. He has been at Auburn for a couple seasons now, and he has started to break out over the past 4 games, which I was floored by this. I was speechless when I saw this stat. We have been impressed watching him play, but when you look at the numbers, he is 15 of 21 from 3 over Auburn's last 4 games. So he is shooting 71%, which is like, I don't even know what to say about that. So I feel like he has really stepped up this season, and he's been a constant. He's been so consistent. He's playing incredible defense, and he's one that Auburn has been able to rely on all season, but especially these past 4 games. And then do you want me to, are we going exceed?
No. It's stay right there, because I agree with you with Denver. He wasn't the guy I thought you were going to say. I put down 2 guys in case you went with mine. But Denver, I think, has really been fantastic at the point when he has the ball in his hand distributing it. And he's been really good at shooting. So that's a great answer. I thought you were going to go Tahaad Pettiford. I thought Pettiford was going to be your answer, because every time I hear you talk in the offices up here, you've raved about Pettiford, and I just thought that was going to be the guy you picked. So why did you go Denver over Pettiford? I'm interested.
I was toying with the idea of both, and Tahaad would be my 1B. I think he has exceeded my expectations as well. I feel like you never really know what you can expect from a freshman, because you don't know how their game will translate. He was obviously very talented coming out of high school, but the thing that stood out to me about Tahaad is that he shows up in big games more so than, the lesser opponents. And I feel like that's so rare, especially for a young guy, but primetime Pettiford. Yeah. He shows up in big games, and Houston was one of those. So I feel like he's very trustworthy in games when other guys might, their shots might not be falling, which is very important. It is very impressive, especially considering how young he is. But so I don't really know why I didn't go with him. I think he's about even with Denver, but I feel like Denver is just breaking out right now. So wanted to give him some love.
What you were talking about with Pettiford, he had 18 against Purdue. He had 20 against Duke. You talked about Houston. He's been there big. So he was the guy I went first, but I thought that's who you were going to go with. So my backup plan was Miles Kelly, who's averaging almost 10 a game. He had 14 at Duke. He had a big game against North Carolina, even a bigger game against Iowa State. So I expected what we're getting from Denver, okay? Pettiford has surprised me Miles Kelly has been way more than I thought Miles Kelly was going to be. And maybe I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But I've been really impressed with Miles Kelly on what he has brought to the table early in the season.
I don't think you're wrong at all. And I think the first show that we did before, I cannot remember what Auburn game it was, but one of the early on games. And he was one of the guys when you said, who are you excited to watch or who are you expecting to make an impact this season? And my answer was Miles Kelly for no real reason other than what I'd heard about him. I didn't go back and watch a bunch of tape before he transferred, but I'd heard great things about him. I think that, there's so many guys that I could have picked for Auburn because I feel like they're like Chaney Johnson has also made a massive jump this season. But Miles, yeah, I'll say he's a 1C.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot of ones.
Yeah.
Let's go to Alabama on who has exceeded your expectations at Alabama. You go first. Who's exceeded your expectations so far this year at Alabama?
My favorite player on the roster last year, I was a huge Nick Pringle fan, and I think it's because of how entertaining he was when we were able to go into the locker room at the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament to do post-game interviews. And he just had a great personality. So that, drew me to him. He was very, very charismatic, very entertaining.
You shared first class flight with him to Spokane. You shared a flight with him, right?
Yeah, and we flew together.
Yes.
For the first round of the tournament. But this season, my favorite player, Labaron Philon. I would say that a lot of things that I just said about Tahaad, I would say about Labaron. He was highly recruited and highly ranked coming out of high school, but his game has transitioned. He makes plays. He's electric. He's so fun to watch. The games that I've been able to go to in Tuscaloosa, big personality. He's entertaining, and he is obviously extremely talented, and he's a freshman, true freshman.
Now, we're going to go back and check your comments, everyone. So if you want to leave comments on these, even though these are not live, we respect your comments. You can hit us up on social media. Both of us are there on Twitter. But where you're watching this right now, whatever platform, we'll go back and read the comments. So my guy who exceeded expectations at Alabama is Aden Holloway. And I say that because of how he continues to grow in the offense and the defense, but particularly the offense that Nate Oates has him in. With right cell going down, that could have hurt Alabama a lot. And Aden Holloway seems to be stepping up, averaging about 10 points a game. One of many Tide players that are a double-digit scorer right now. He had 28 against South Dakota State, hit 8 threes. Now, I don't expect that from him at all. But if he continues to hit 3 or 4 threes a game, be really good with the basketball he is, fast off the dribble, distribute it out to the shooters, draw some attention with penetration, then kick it out. I like the way Holloway's playing right now. I know he's a big name going to Auburn, but after watching so many games with him at Auburn, my expectations for him at Alabama have been exceeded there. Let's go on the negative side now. And again, you're watching The Basketball Show with Taylor and Jim, and we're going to do this all year. And this is episode 1 leading into our opening weekend out of SEC play. And we'll talk about Missouri and Auburn coming up and Oklahoma and Alabama as we do SEC openers. Who has not yet met your expectation at Auburn?
This breaks my heart because I want him to succeed so bad, but JP Pegues, he had a great run at Furman. And I think that people were kind of expecting the type of production that you're seeing from Miles Kelly from JP Pegues. And this is just my opinion, but I feel like he looks a little lost when he's on the court. And his minutes have dropped drastically. He is now going in with the walk-ons, and I hate it for him because I think that he was expecting to come in and was expecting to be productive and get a lot of minutes, and it just hasn't worked out. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a lack of confidence after he struggled the first few games or what, but he's a guy that I want to see succeed so bad, but his shots just are not falling.
He's my guy too, and to your point, he hasn't played double-digit minutes since the Memphis game. out in the Maui Invitational. It's like, not that they've given up on him, but he's back burner now. He was given his chance. Too many other players are playing really well, and he doesn't seem to be on the forefront anymore. What about in Tuscaloosa?
My answer for Alabama is based a lot on what I witnessed when we were in Tuscaloosa on Sunday.
Yeah.
Is that when we were last there?
We were there last there, yes.
Cliff Omoruyi. I think
okay,
I'm
that's a
pronouncing
good
his
one.
last
That's a
name
good one.
right.
I almost went with Cliff because we were expecting him to be the guy in the
The
middle.
guy.
I didn't go with him, but that's a great answer. Tell me why.
He, like you said, was expected to be. Alabama struggled defensively last year. They could score all the points in the world, but they struggled on defense. So if their shots weren't falling, that's a recipe for disaster. And a lot of times their ability to score saved them, but Nate Oates, everyone was talking about Alabama's struggles defensively all season. And Cliff was what everyone assumed was going to be the solution to that problem. And he has not been as effective as I think I was expecting him to be. And there was some frustration that I witnessed, and we talked about this. What game was that? Was that the Creighton game?
The Creighton game, yes.
The Creighton game. It seemed as if some of his teammates were getting a little frustrated in a way of, I know that you can be better than this. Come on, motivation, not as in dissension, but I think that they're capable of they know what he's capable of doing.
And you're talking specifically on the offensive end of the floor, because he's been okay on the defensive end, but on the offensive side where they need him to contribute, or as you told me Grant Nelson was yelling at him, move around, Cliff, move. Got to be moving in that offense.
Yes. So that was my takeaway, and I think that that's just because that's what's the most fresh on my mind from the Creighton game was the frustration from Grant Nelson specifically, and that kind of stuck with me. So I went with Cliff.
Jarin Stevenson for me, because I think Jarrett, and he's a great defender. For instance, he may get the best shooter, the guard that Oklahoma brings to town this weekend, and Jeremiah Fears. He could have some minutes on him. He does a great job when he's put on a good shooter on the other team. But I expect more offensively from Jarin Stevenson, like we saw. I think it was the Elite Eight game that punched the ticket to the Final Four last year. Stevenson has the capabilities of also not just being a great defender, but also at the offensive end of the floor, hitting those threes. He gets a lot of looks out there, and I believe his shot will come around. So when I say he's not meeting my expectations yet, doesn't mean that I give up on Jarin Stevenson. I love the kid. This should be his freshman year instead of his sophomore year. He came to Alabama early, and I think he's going to have a great SEC season, and will be a part of what Alabama does down the stretch, but he hasn't met my expectation. We're going to keep this rolling for you every time we do one of these recorded shows, so that it's easy to listen to on your drive to work, or if you want to just throw it in audio-wise, we're going to have it for you on Apple and Spotify, just the audio version if you want to do it when you're on the treadmill or whatever. And again, we'll do the recorded version twice a week, and then live post-game home and away. We'll be on site at Neville and Coleman for the home games all year long, but when they're on the road, we'll hit you up with post-game too right here in this type of platform, but live so you can interact. We got to move quickly through the rest of this stuff now. Best 3 wins for Auburn. When I asked this question to you, it's hard for me to put it down on a list. We're talking pre-conference. We're going to SEC play, and Auburn's got so many that I could put on the list here. It was hard for me to rank them 1, 2, and 3. So where did you go 1, 2, and 3 for Auburn?
I went 1 Iowa State just because of the comeback. They were down 16 at the half. They were away from Neville Arena. And I think that was the first time that this team was really, really tested. I know that they had played Houston prior, but that was their big test. And
I don't know if that's the smart answer or if that is you and I spending so much time together the last basketball season that we have started to look at things the same, because technically in the metrics, Houston is 1 spot ahead of Iowa State, So if you're just going by the numbers, Houston should be the best win. But I too went Iowa State for the same reason, because backs were against, they were down. I was like, man, Auburn's about to get run out of the gym. And
Yeah.
they came back and won the game. So I put them number 1, too on that list.
That's Houston's number 2 for me. Houston's
Me
number
too.
2. And it was because of Tahaad's performance. That was his coming out party as a college basketball player. He showed out that game. And again, I'm going to call it a true road game. I know it was a neutral site, but it was in Houston. So I'm calling it a road game. So that was my number 2.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this too. And I know, some people would say the media may make too much of the plane incident, but when you turn a plane around and go back, but that was that game.
I don't know how I forgot about that.
Yeah, and for the team to go and play the way they play and win that game and turn what happened on the plane into a rallying cry the rest of the year, I think that was a massive win for Auburn. So I put that number 2 as well. Who do you squeeze in at 3?
3, okay, so my answer here is probably going to be very confusing. I have 3. I have Purdue, but then I almost put Georgia State because Janai got hurt in the first 2 minutes, I think it was.
Right.
And after he went out, they looked like a mess. And it made me nervous. I think it made everyone in the media there nervous that was, worried about Janai is the glue of this team. He's what holds them together. And, he's taken out. He doesn't play the entire game every game, but if he's out, what's going to happen? And so that, I think, was a big win as in confidence builder, and we can be productive without him. It took a hot second for things to start rolling again, but I think that it should build the confidence of the team that if something like that were to happen and they lose a key component, things might be rocky for a second, but they got back on track, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does. I went Memphis because, one, it won the Maui Classic, the Maui Invitational. Yep. And I think that's something that, when the season's done, that'll be something you can say, okay, first SEC team since early 1990s to win the Maui Invitational. That was something. And I think by the time we get to March Madness, I think this Memphis team is going to move higher up the metrics, and it's going to be one of those really good quality wins that Auburn will have on its resume. I think that Memphis team is going to be nasty before the season's over with. So that was number 3 for me. Quickly through the Alabama list. Alabama 1, 2, 3. Who is your number 1 Alabama win? Not as many to choose from on the Alabama side, though they have played a nice, tough pre-conference schedule as well. But their big wins seem to be pretty obvious.
Illinois was number 1 for me.
Yeah.
And my thought process behind that was the game that Mark Sears scored 0 points.
Right.
And coming into the season, he was their biggest weapon offensively. So the fact that they were still able to beat a talented Illinois team without him having any production offensively in terms of scoring, that left an impact on me.
Yeah. I too went Illinois for that reason. When you've got Mark Sears, who you've relied on so much, to go with 0, and I thought it was great for Mark the way he handled that game and how everyone else, Labaron Philon and Aden Holloway and Grant Nelson, everybody just rallied to score points in that contest. So I went Illinois 2. I went Houston 2 because Houston's a good win no matter where you can beat them. And then I know the numbers, they're in the 60s in the metrics right now, but I think Creighton will be a good win when it's all said and done. So I went Creighton number 3 as well. Who'd you go 2 and 3?
I went Houston 2. Also, I think an overtime win away from home. That's hard to do. They pulled it off. And I didn't have a number 3. I didn't want to throw it. I didn't want to throw a 3 in there just to have a number 3. And like you said, it was kind of hard to pick from, but their strength of schedule is incredibly high. But I had Illinois, Houston.
Illinois, Houston. I hear you. It's Creighton for me. Alabama's losses to Purdue, true road game, and to Oregon out in Las Vegas. Auburn's only loss to number 3 in the metrics, Duke, on their home floor true road game. So it's been a great pre-conference, best in Auburn history, one of the best in Alabama history going into the SEC play, which starts this weekend. Before we talk Auburn, before we talk Oklahoma, Alabama, and before we get to the mailbag or wrap this thing up, we're brought to you always by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag, promo code next round, mybookie.ag, promo code next round, go play there, and by roback.com, promo code is TNR20, TNR20 gets you 20% off at roback.com. You have done a graphic for us, both Alabama and Auburn's schedule, on just how tough the SEC is. Last I checked, and it was 2 days ago, so it may have changed a little bit. 14 of the top 16 teams in the SEC in the net was in the top 50, and one team, LSU, was 53. So 15 of the top 16 teams in the SEC were in the top 53, which means home or away, the worst case scenario is a quad 2 game, and most of your SEC schedule is a quad 1 game. Quick analysis of what a quad 1 is for people that don't understand. You want to explain it, or what a quad 1 win is?
Yeah, so a quad 1, and the ranking, so a quad 1 win is if you're playing a team that is ranked 1 through 30 in the net rankings. A quad 1 win on a neutral floor is if you're playing a team that is ranked 1 through 50, again, in the net rankings, and then away 1 through 75. So those are all quad 1, home, neutral, away. Obviously, away 1 through 75, neutral 1 through 50, home 1 through 30. And then quad 2, I only went from quad 1 and quad 2 because all the SEC games are going to be quad 1 and quad 2 games.
Yeah.
But quad 2 at home, 30.
And it's worth noting that it's not when you play them. That changes throughout the year.
Yep.
So what may be a quad 2 win for you at one point, or a quad 2 loss, could end up being a quad 1 win or loss by the end of the year. It changes as it goes on. So show me the Auburn graphic. Walk me through this just to show you what Auburn has coming up and what Bruce Pearl literally said, Taylor, the toughest conference schedule in Auburn history.
So Auburn starts with Missouri on Saturday, and that will be a quad 2 game. They go to Texas next, which will be a quad 1 game, at South Carolina, quad 2. And then their next game is versus Mississippi State, at Georgia, versus Tennessee, at LSU, at Ole Miss. Those 5 are all quad 1 opportunities. Oklahoma comes to Neville Arena. That's their second February game, February 4th. That's a quad 2 opportunity. And then Florida at Neville Arena, quad 1, at Vandy, at Alabama, both quad 1 opportunities. Arkansas comes to Auburn. That's a quad 2 opportunity. Georgia comes to Auburn. That's quad 1 opportunity. Ole Miss comes to Auburn, quad 2. And then at Kentucky and Texas A&M are both quad 1 opportunities. And then Alabama comes to Neville Arena to wrap up the season. And that is an opportunity to end the season with a potential quad 1 win. And Alabama's, and I know that we're going to get there, but there's something very interesting to me about the way the Alabama schedule is laid out.
Yeah, look at it now. Put the graphic up, and you'll look at it. And I think what you're going to talk about is the way Alabama's plays out is right now their last 11 SEC games are all quad 1 games in a row. Boom, 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 boom. Alabama's schedule, I even though I think if I counted right, 13 of the 18 right now is quad 1 for Auburn, and Alabama's last 11 are quad 1. I think their schedules are pretty equal. But the way Alabama's lay out, I think Alabama's schedule's a tad tougher. But you always think I think Alabama's a little tougher than Auburn's anyway.
Well, no, I was going to ask you this because I don't know what do you think is beneficial? Do you think it's beneficial easing, which none of these games are going to be easy, but
none of them. Yes, none of them will be.
If you look at it strictly from what type of win it is according to the net metrics, do you think it's better for them to, get into conference play with what the net is assuming is not as challenging as a win? Auburn's are scattered throughout. Their first game, third game, and then a few, sprinkled in there are throughout the rest of the schedule are quad 2. But Alabama's out of their first 2, 4, 6, 8. Out of their first 2 games are quad 2. Then they have 1 quad 1, quad 2, quad one, quad two, and then the rest of the schedule is quad one win. So do you think it's because by the end of the schedule, you would hope, or ideally, they would be kicking, rolling into the
Yeah.
SEC tournament. But
I know what you're saying. I
I
think
don't
Taylor,
know.
I think it doesn't matter. I think even the
Yeah,
quad two games in the SEC are that tough this year. And by the time you play them, what looks like to be quad two right now, maybe quad ones when you get there.
right.
Who knows how it's going to work out, because we're about to feed each other in this metrics that's going to make it tough. Insane. And it all starts Saturday. So let's look at Missouri and Auburn down at Neville Arena. You'll be at that game, 3 o'clock. All of our coverage on social media at Next Round Live, all platforms at Next Round Live. Like and subscribe when you're there. When you think about Missouri at Auburn, you think about what? First thing.
Well, their two losses. They have two losses, and one of them came their first game of the season, which was to Memphis, which we just talked about. We expect to be a very talented team. And then their second loss was to Illinois. They beat Kansas, and that stands out to me because Kansas was number one for a hot second to start the season. So a talented team. They pulled off an upset there. Their roster, their guys that are playing the most minutes are veteran guys, a lot of juniors and seniors. So that's going to be beneficial, especially when you're playing on the road in a tough environment. It'll be nothing new to them. And they are ranked number one in all of Division I basketball in bench points per game. So
that's because they
have
play
a lot of
11 bodies,
production.
just like Auburn do. They play 11 guys. Will get double-digit minutes, so they run them in there like Bruce does.
So that's, I think, I mean, there's not really one guy looking at strictly points per game. It doesn't seem like they're super reliant on just one guy.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested defensively. I think that Auburn needs to work on a little bit of ball control, not turning it over so much. And
I would tell you this, that if you look at their roster, most of their roster has G beside them. They're guards. Most of them are guards. So there's a potential, you would think, for Dylan Cardwell and for Janai Broome to have an amazing weekend because it's a bunch of guards they're playing. But they're so good on the perimeter. They're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. They score 87 points a game. And they actually beat Kansas in the paint, outscored them 32-30 in the paint. And Kansas is a bigger basketball team to them. So I think that's an amazing challenge for Auburn this weekend. Auburn should win the game, especially in Neville Arena. But it'll be a test of that Auburn defense to take them off of the perimeter, such a perimeter-dominating team. But they actually beat Kansas in the paint, 32-30 to win that game. That was such a big win for them.
Yeah, that I'm defensively Auburn. I think they're ranked in the top 10 according to KenPom, or they were at one point. Again, these numbers change all the time. But I think defensively it'll be a big game, and defense without fouling, always important.
Yeah, and that Kansas, they beat Kansas 31 free throws. So that's a great point. Defense without fouling. They had 31 free throws in that win over Kansas. Oklahoma, Alabama, I'll be at that game 5 o'clock Saturday, and we'll be live after both of those games. Oklahoma hasn't lost. They're 13-0, but they haven't really played a tough schedule yet either. Best win probably over Michigan, who beat them in size. But Jeremiah Fears is their big guy, 6'4" guard, averaging 18 points a game. And he dropped 30, I think it was, on Michigan and had a 4-point play at the end. This team shoots the threes well. They were 12 of 25 in that win over Michigan from three-point range. What do you think of this Oklahoma team that's coming to play Alabama that's ranked high and they're unbeaten? They're 13-0.
Well, that's obviously something that stands out is that I believe Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Florida are the only 3 teams left without a loss. But their strength of schedule is ranked 222nd. So
some good names, though. I mean, they beat Louisville, they beat Arizona, they beat Providence. Usually those programs are good. They're just not that good this year. They beat Michigan, Northwestern, Oklahoma State, Georgia Tech. I mean, we know those names. We see those names in the NCAA tournament a lot. But this year, those names just aren't where they have been in the past.
Right. And they're ranked 8th in three-point defense and defending the three-point shot. And Alabama I think Alabama's 3rd in the country in attempted three-point shots per game. So I think, if Alabama, when their shots start falling, good luck to whoever's playing them. But I think that will be an interesting matchup from shooting from the perimeter.
Yeah, there's been a couple of times this year Alabama's hasn't got up, hasn't even attempted as many threes as Nate Oates would like. Some games this weekend at Next Round Live for all the post-game coverage and all the fun pageantry of the games. We try to show that to you, some highlights from the game, some good fan stuff and behind-the-scenes stuff. We end every one of these for your ride-in on Friday or to the game on Saturday, or our Sunday night version for your ride to work on Monday with the mailbag or what's trending, whatever we're going to end up calling this. Taylor's got a couple of questions from you guys every week that she throws at us to wrap up the show. So, Taylor, take it away. What do we have from the audience?
Okay, this is one that I found very interesting, and I know that you saw it because we had a little conversation about it, but this is from Shoals Guy. Asked, who has been the most dynamic freshman so far? I'm assuming that this is a comparison between Auburn and Alabama, and I think it's an interesting question because both teams have highly recruited, highly rated freshmen, true freshmen.
I'll do the Alabama one. You do the Auburn one. Who's been the Auburn true freshman you've liked so far?
I feel like we need to compare the teams because, right?
Okay, sure.
And I don't know. That's why I think it's so interesting because I think that Labaron is the guy that stands out for Alabama, obviously, and he has put up big numbers more consistently, I would think, than Tahaad has. But like I said earlier, what stood out about Tahaad to me is that he shows up in the big time games, which is not normal or not very common for a young guy.
I think what you're trying to say is Alabama counts on Labaron Philon more than Auburn counts on Pettiford. Is that what you're trying to say? Because I mean, Philon's got to play great for Alabama. He's a big part of what they're trying to do. Pettiford, when he plays great for Auburn, that's good, but it's about Chad Baker, Janai, and Denver. And you go down a few pegs before you get to Pettiford. In Tuscaloosa, you don't go too far. You need Philon to be there every night.
Yeah, well, he's also starts. Tahaad isn't starting, so. Right. Which, I mean, I think he could. Yeah. But, so I guess, I don't know, depend, sure. But him, and then Jakai, I'm proud of Jakai. I'm very proud of Jakai. The stat sheet isn't going to be as full because he was involved in the plane altercation at the beginning of the season. So he did sit for a while. But he has the electricity. His nickname's Showtime, and he puts on a show. So he's been so fun to watch. He hasn't played nearly as much as Tahaad has or Labaron has, but he's just a fun player. He's a dynamic player, and he's electric.
So do we have another question? You tell me when the last one is.
We do. This is one that y'all discussed on the next round, I believe, earlier this week. I don't know, my days are messed up because of the break, but what do you think the record needs to be to win the regular season SEC title this year?
18 games you play.
Yeah.
I'm going to say we have two teams that end up being 13-5. So I think 13 is it. And I don't know who they will be. Obviously, Auburn's the favorite to win it when you look at the betting odds. Tennessee's number one in the country in the polls, the human polls. Auburn's number one in the index. But, I mean, I think 13-5, and I think Auburn fans and Alabama fans who have these high hopes need to realize that the conference is so good that you can lose 5 games over these next few weeks before we get to the SEC tournament, and you still got a really great basketball team. You know what I mean?
And yes, and I feel like we're programmed as a football state where if you lose a football game, it's a different story. Yeah. You're going to lose games during the basketball season. That's just how it is. And it might feel like the end of the world, but it's really not. When was the last time that a team was undefeated?
Ooh. In college basketball for a whole season was 1976, but in SEC play, I don't remember one still.
Yeah, exactly. So I cannot remember. Trent was the one that asked this question, and his prediction was 14-4. So very similar to
14-4 would be a fantastic year, but I feel like 14-4 is about what I've gotten where I expect the SEC champion to be every year. It'll be fun. We'll be with you all the way to Nashville in the SEC tournament and then off to our NCAA tournament sites, where I get the feeling they will not be nice to us and send Alabama and Auburn to the same site in the first two rounds again.
and UAB.
And UAB and Stanford.
Yeah. Everyone.
So there's a good chance that Little T and I will be going separate ways to start the NCAA tournament this next year. But maybe we'll end up in the same place with two teams at the Final Four. Wouldn't that be sweet? She's Taylor Korn. I'm Jim Dunaway. This is the Basketball Show with Taylor and Jim. Comments, likes, subscribes, thumbs up, all that stuff. And we appreciate you being with us. And we will be back on the platform with you after the game, after Auburn, Missouri. We'll do a quick live for your reaction to that, and then a wrap-up show after Oklahoma, Alabama, with a live show as well this Saturday. So set your alerts, and we'll have fun here at Next Round Live all year long with the Basketball Show. Taylor, have a great night.
You guys.
It's almost SEC season.
It's almost time.
Almost time. Almost that time. Have a great night, everybody.